Hi, listeners. This is Chris Batts, your host of the Law Firm Leadership Podcast. Today's episode I'm excited to share is about a general counsel's professional journey in private practice in 2 large companies. What I'm also excited to share with you is about her story of landing her first in-house counsel position from her own efforts. Her story, how she did this, and how you can do it too. Now remember, I make the content of this episode available on my website and as a PDF download. Go to LeaAnnGroupRecruiting.com/podcast. As many of you know, we interview corporate defense law firm leaders, partners, general counsels, and legal consultants. You are listening to episode number 16 of the Law Firm Leadership Podcast.
Broadcasting from Kansas City, this is the Law Firm Leadership Podcast. In each episode, you'll receive actionable ideas and hear personal leadership stories of the top corporate defense law firms from around the United States. Enjoy a front row seat with law firm leaders, their partners, and legal consultants as we discuss life and leadership.
Welcome to the Law Firm Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Batts with the LeaAnn Group. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with LeaAnn King, General Counsel of Toyota Material Handling USA, which is based in Columbus, Indiana. LeaAnn leads a corporate legal department focused on litigation, IP, acquisitions, and corporate governance. Prior to joining Toyota, she was the Vice President and Associate General Counsel with Hill-Rom Holdings, a $1.8 billion public company, which is a leading worldwide manufacturer and provider of medical devices. In this role, she was the Chief Litigation Employment Counsel for all of the U.S. operations. She also began her career with Hill-Rom in 2007 as a staff counsel for litigation. You're going to hear her story about this as well. Since that time, she's held positions of increasing responsibility, including assisting Hill-Rom's security filings and corporate governance and leading the records management program. Prior to Hill-Rom, she was a litigator at Bose McKinney Evans in Indianapolis. She received her BA from Centre College and a cum laude graduate of the University of Louisville School of Law. Welcome, LeaAnn, to the Law Firm Leadership Podcast. It's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thanks, Chris. I'm delighted to be here.
LeaAnn, before we started recording, you shared something that I think my audience is really going to want to hear a story about, and it sounded pretty passionate about it, which is, I'd love for you to tell your story and your desire that while you were in law school, you really wanted to go in-house. Can you describe to my audience how that occurred for you?
Sure. So it actually started while I was in law school and clerking. I found that even working closely with partners who are really kind of what I would see as the go-to for various in-house attorneys, they never knew kind of what Paul Harvey refers to as the rest of the story. I would be involved in matters or be giving kind of legal advice. At that time, it was just more memorandums to the partner, and I would always want to know how did that end up? How did that resolve? And from my purview at that point, you never knew how it ended unless it ended up in litigation. And I was always so curious to know, what did the in-house lawyer do with our guidance or our counsel? Did they disregard it? Did they act on it? And kind of what happened factually with the business?
What gave you the confidence that you would be able to land a job in-house?
Well, I always joke and say I think sometimes you have to stalk a little bit to get the job of your dreams. And so I always tell people who talk about wanting to go in-house that really drilling down, if you truly want to go in-house, it's going to be because there is a company that you want to work for, whether that's because of the type of work that company does, the industry that they're in, or it's ranked on one of the best places to work, or geographically it makes sense to you, or there's even a leader in the legal team or the president of that company that you want to work for. But it's usually one of those kind of 3 areas that people focus in on and say, that's where I want to work and that's why I want to work there. And I think a lot of times it takes some self-discipline to step back and stop just saying, I want to go in-house, but to say, I want to go in-house and here's where I want to go. Here is my dream job. And I think once a person realizes, that's where I want to go, it makes the transition to going in-house a lot easier because you've got one focus. And that's kind of how it happened for me, quite frankly.
So you were in law school and you envisioned yourself getting a job at Hill-Rom, or that was a type of company you wanted to work for?
Right. No, I can't say I was that focused when I was in law school. Actually, when I went into private practice, I continued to do a variety of different work for different types of clients. So some kind of service clients, some that were manufacturing, and some that were healthcare based. And I tried to identify which of those companies that I liked. But more of what dictated me ending up at Hillrom was actually I got married while I was at Bose McKinney & Evans. And geographically, my husband had to be in a certain area because of his job. So I was driving about an hour and 15 minutes one way to work as a young associate at Bose McKinney. And so I started to think about geographically, what are some companies closer that I might be able to go work for. And one of those companies just happened to be 5 minutes from my house and was Hillrom Holdings, which publicly traded medical device growing company at the time. And I did a little bit of sleuthing, and my firm actually was doing some work for them. And from time to time, I would do document review, but I wasn't really known to the client, if you will. Probably my name would show up on billings, but I didn't have any relationships with them. So I did the research that I could about what best through public filings and online I could determine about the composition of their legal team. And I figured out that they had a vice president of litigation. And so I cold called one evening and got her voicemail and said, "You don't know me, but here's who I am. I live in Batesville, where Hillrom is, and I'd love to have coffee with you and understand how I can become an attractive candidate should you ever have a need on your team." I failed to tell my husband that I had made that phone call. And then the next night I came home. I didn't really think anything about it. I wasn't sure if I would ever get a return call or hear anything. It was almost kind of like cold calling for sales in some way. And the next night I came home from work, and my husband opened the door and said, "Is there something you want to tell me?" And I said, "I have no idea what you're talking about." He said, "I just had the most uncomfortable conversation because I answered the phone, and it was a woman who is the head of litigation for Hillrom. And she was quizzing me about your experience and your job. And all I kept saying is, please keep this confidential. I'm sure she doesn't want to lose her job where she is currently, because it just happened coincidentally that she had started her career at the same firm I was at the time. So she wanted to kind of play the name game, if you will, with my husband. But it was kind of one of those great opportunities because she had actually just lost somebody on her legal team and had an immediate need. So within 2 months of me making that call, I landed my in-house job.
I absolutely love that, LeaAnn, and I'm a big advocate of encouraging people to do this, but you did something incredibly gutsy. First off, you had a plan. You found a company that was close to you. How did you know to go look for the VP of litigation?
Well, I'd done online, and I'm sure every state has something similar. Like Indiana posts every year a directory of all of the in-house lawyers in the state. And so by company, it lists out who the attorneys are that work for that company. And so that's really where I started. And then once I had a name, I just did what investigative work I could from there.
And is that directory available through the Bar Association? The state bar?
It is. It's through the Indianapolis Bar Association puts it together. And it's a tremendous resource, not only then, but even now I kind of use it when I'm trying to think of, okay, who else would be struggling with a similar issue or dealt with this same issue.
Yeah, that sounds like a huge resource. And so you do what I don't know very many attorneys that have the courage to do, but you picked up the phone and cold called this individual. And so tell me about the next steps after that. So she obviously talked to your husband, and was it 1 or 2 meetings after that? And were there other candidates in the mix?
It was not 1 or 2 meetings after that. So one distinction probably between law firms and corporate America is the hiring process can be pretty arduous.
Yep.
Because you're into this an HR function that has a process that maybe attorneys and attorneys' roles don't fit well within, but they will wedge that square peg into the round hole every time. And so it was a pretty lengthy interview process. both not just with starting with her. I think it would have been pretty easy if it was just her decision to make, but having to go through HR and then meet with the general counsel at the time for the organization, as well as some of the support team that I would be working with. And there were other candidates, and interestingly, they actually ended up hiring two of us at the same time. It was just one of those, I think they had a more senior person in the role historically. And so I think financially and from an experience level, they felt like bringing in two junior lawyers, we could probably better handle the workload based on where we were in our career.
Okay. Can you boil down some takeaways for my audience in this whole process you just went through, from research and initiation and approaching the company yourself to going through arduous interviews to receiving an offer? What are some of those key takeaways that people could glean from this process?
Well, I think first, it's so much easier to get any job, but speaking more of a corporate job or in-house, actually knowing somebody and having a relationship, even if it's just that personal phone call, is more attractive than a resume through a recruiter or a resume through an online application system.
Yeah. And when you say know somebody, you're just talking about the head of the litigation there that you spoke with.
She didn't know me really from Adam, but I stood out to her in what ended up being the interview process because I had taken the first step to proactively call when I didn't even know there was a job. There was no job for me to apply for. And that's where I think a lot of attorneys who want to go in-house kind of wait for that perfect job opportunity to present, either from a recruiter bringing it to them or online. And quite frankly, it's real easy to get lost in the shuffle if that's what you do. And moreover, a lot of those opportunities don't even make it to that stage, that you don't even get visibility. So that's why I'm always, as young lawyers kind of say, how can I go in-house? I'm always like, figure out where it is that you want to go. If geography is restrictive to you, then that narrows it down, and then try to network. Don't always just be waiting for what can you do for me in terms of giving me a job, but what can you do for them? What are ways that you can learn their business now or learn more about their legal team now and the people that you be working with? Because everybody wants to hire somebody that's going to be a good fit. And so there's no better way to figure that out than early. That's kind of what started the process for me. And then I think you've just got to be patient and realize that a lot of lawyers were trained to make decisions quickly, but that's not the way of the corporate world. And as much as the attorney that is going to be hiring you or the CEO that's going to be hiring you may want to move real quickly, there is a certain process dictated usually by the HR function that dictates what all has to happen before an offer can be extended. So you've just got to be patient and kind of just go with the process and not kind of let our natural tendency, I think, as lawyers to kind of go back and kind of pester in some ways to say, have you made a decision? Have you made a decision? And just go along with the flow.
And so what time of the year did you approach that head of litigation?
So I want to say it was around mid-April. Okay. And I did not start until close to December.
Oh, wow. So that was a long process.
It was a very long process because she had at various times kind of almost acted like, this is a done deal. But then she kept getting reined back in from HR of, you didn't take this. Like here, even at Toyota, most companies a lot of times will have certain tests that they want folks to take to see kind of your natural tendencies and your personality because they have, a range that they have been able to demonstrate folks that are successful in their organization fit certain profiles.
Yeah, and that's definitely an increasing matter I find among employers. Just to ask another question, I think my audience might be asking, did you have other opportunities, in the funnel for you? Did you approach other companies?
I didn't. I was kind of laser focused. And that's not to say that I guess if that one hadn't worked out, I wouldn't have refocused. But I just kind of got lucky that the first call I made worked out for me.
That's just great. And is it safe to assume, and we'll come back to this again, but is it safe to assume this is how you landed at Toyota?
Similar. I actually had a recruiter who had contacted me a few times about different opportunities, and finally I said, you know what, here's what I'm looking for, and here's what that next role has to be. It either has to be a role like I have now, leading a legal team for a specific subject matter area at a larger company, or it's got to be the next step of being general counsel. And so it was probably 6 or 7 months later, she called and she said, I think I found the job for you.
So in that case, it wasn't you pursuing the employer. You actually had a recruiter in the process with you. You know, and it's because you're in the role of an employer at this point. You're a general counsel of a large company. I mean, how often do you see recruiters being used for in-house recruiting?
We've used them for the roles that we've had to fill here.
Okay.
But that is usually in conjunction with or only after we have not been able to source candidates through our own network.
Oh, wow. So you're a little bit more desperate is when you talk to them.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't want to say it, but normally, I mean, it's just you want to go with somebody who's kind of a known commodity. And so, you know, in-house attorneys have their own network of colleagues and friends that they've developed through the years. So we have kind of this email list that a lot of times we'll just send out a blast and say, I'm looking for this type of attorney. If you know anybody, let me know.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's fascinating. So, and just going back to you being brought on by Hill-Rom for corporate defense attorneys, where I'm approached by them by the dozens every week wanting to go in-house. Here is an example that's just so incredibly clear how to find one. And it's interesting. Is it safe to say, LeaAnn, that you would more likely hire somebody approaching you versus someone a recruiter's presenting to you?
Hands down.
Okay.
I mean, it's just, you have that initiative that somebody's taken, and usually you've got to have credibility behind it, right? So they're not just approaching me because they're hoping that Toyota is going to be the next one that's going to have an opening. But if somebody comes to me with a general interest and genuine interest in the products that we make, or in the fact that we are a Japanese company and they would like to work for a Japanese company, whatever the reason is, that says so much more than the best candidate that could be presented by a recruiter.
Yeah. Yeah. And I want my listeners to hear that. I have to apologize. I'm going to go back to your story again. Did you do anything else to get the attention to stand out at Hill-Rom?
Other than picking up the phone, no.
Okay. Yeah, that's really important. So sometimes it's the littlest things that make some of the biggest differences in just picking up phone versus emailing a resume.
And that's what I kind of think of today. I think if I'd sent an email and said, you know, here's who I am, I think it would have been so easily deleted.
Yep.
But just taking that extra step and kind of that whole thing of do something every day that scares you,
yep.
Kind of put myself out there a little bit. I
absolutely love that. I'm a huge subscriber of that. Very good. Well, LeaAnn, thank you for sharing that story. I think it's immensely valuable for folks. Let's transition to your role at Toyota Material Industries. Tell us about the company a little bit and tell us about this role that you are now a general counsel.
Sure. So I work for Toyota Material Handling USA. We are the sales and marketing arm for Toyota branded forklifts here in the United States and Canada. We're the number one selling forklift brand in the United States, have been for a number of years. And in my role, I provide not only legal support to sales and marketing, but also to our manufacturing corporation here in Columbus, Indiana, as well as we have 6 company-owned stores that sell, market, and service our forklifts. So it's a wide variety of what I'll call internal customers that I serve on any given day. And that's what I enjoy the most is that variety. So I can be doing a IP license agreement one minute. I can be doing an acquisition agreement another minute. I can be counseling an HR rep on terminating somebody.
You had mentioned just briefly that it's not really a U.S. company per se. You're actually owned by a Tokyo company, correct?
Yes. So our ultimate parent company is Toyota Industries Corporation out of Takahama, Japan. So we are not though we may be affiliated somehow in the ownership chain, we are not directly a subsidiary or related entity of Toyota Motors Corporation. So I always joke and say, if you're in the market for a Camry, I can't help you, but if you need a forklift, I'm your gal.
That's excellent. And what is it like being a part of a company that's publicly traded on the Tokyo Stock Exchange?
Well, so it's more similar. I came from Hillrom Holdings, which is publicly traded on the New York Stock Exchange. And then coming here, it feels more like it is privately held or even at times a family-owned company. I always say I get the best of both worlds when I came to Toyota because you have one of the world's most recognizable brands. So people instantly recognize our logo and what Toyota is and what it stands for. But here within Toyota Material Handling, we are a very small company. And so, they still have potluck lunches at times or all hands meetings with all the staff coming in. So you really get the best of both worlds. You get the Toyota brand, the Toyota resources, and the Toyota kind of way. If you've read any of those books, we have all that here, but then we get the benefit of being a very small organization.
That's excellent. Tell me about the leap that you made from Hillrom and the roles and responsibilities you had there to the role that you have now as General Counsel. Give us some more color about the differences that you're seeing.
One of the main differences for me in the role that I have now versus the role I previously held is there I was reporting to our general counsel, our chief legal officer. And so while I did interact with the CEO and the board on occasion, it wasn't a regular part of my day-to-day work. And when I came here, one of the first observations I made back to my former general counsel was I had no idea how important the relationship between myself and the president and that dynamic and trying to become his trusted advisor would be. And she said, I know, would you have taken the job if I'd told you? Because it brought to light, I've seen a lot of colleagues who kind of follow one of their peers. And what I mean by that is you'll be in a large company together and one of your fellow members of the executive team will leave to go lead a business to become a president or CEO of another business. And a lot of times one of that lawyer will follow that person. And I never appreciated how valuable that was until I came here because I was an outsider in the industry. I was an outsider to Toyota and Japanese culture, and I was an outsider to having a relationship with our president. And so I had to learn all that. I had to learn a new industry. I had to learn a ton of acronyms, all beginning with T, of course. And then I had to convince this president that I was not only a capable, competent attorney that he hired, but that I was his trusted advisor. I needed to be his strategic partner as he thought about doing things and moving the business forward. I wanted to be the one that he consulted with.
And is the president Japanese?
He's not. Okay. He's not. So we do have a Japanese president over manufacturing, but my direct boss is American.
Got it. Tell me about, and we're going to pivot a little bit. Well, before we do, let me ask you, why did you take the opportunity to go to Toyota?
It was the natural thing, right? I mean, I always tell people, you're kind of raised, or at least when I was growing up, you're raised to get the best grades you could so that you could get the best job you could, so that you could kind of move up the corporate rung. And as much times as people say your career development is more of a jungle gym than a ladder, something I completely ascribe to, there are times when the next role is truly the next role. And so it really felt like becoming a general counsel was something that I wanted to do. I wasn't sure it was going to happen for me at Hillrom Holdings. Like I mentioned, my husband, he's an attorney, but actually he was elected judge during the time I was at Hillrom. And so with his role, we couldn't relocate. And I think for me to have been successful as a general counsel at Hillrom would have required relocation or at least me to be away from home most days of the week. And with having a young family, that wasn't where we wanted to go at this stage in our life.
It makes a lot of sense. Let's talk about corporate legal department trends right now. I mean, so in my conversation with General Counsel, there's been discussion, there's been articles in the news about basically the boom of corporate legal departments and the shrinking demand for defense law firms. Are you feeling that? Is that happening right now for you at Toyota?
We've been pretty stagnant in the number of attorneys that we have, but we don't have a whole lot of outside counsel spend. One of the other big differences in moving from medical device publicly traded to Toyota material handling was the lack of kind of, I'll say, square legal issues that you really need a certain level of expertise around. Mm-hmm. So we haven't seen it necessarily here, but among colleagues who are at other companies, I think it becomes this complete ROI that more and more companies are seeing their lawyers not just as a lawyer, but as a trusted business advisor who truly have the proverbial seat at the table and who offer more value and are doing more things than just legal. And so I think as that transformation has happened versus we'll call you if we see a legal issue that we need you to work on versus this pretty broad leadership role that lawyers are being asked to fit into, it's become easier, I think, for lawyers to make the case to bring more people inside. And I think more and more our teams internally at companies are seeing greater value, are seeing that they appreciate somebody who knows the business and speaks the language and understands risk tolerance. And with that, it's pretty easy business case to make for ROI to say, instead of hiring the outside lawyer, let's spend a little bit more or put in personnel costs versus operating expenses and let me hire somebody.
Yeah, it makes all the sense in the world. Let's transition to diversity and women issues. I know you have a passion for this very front of center topic right now. Can you share your story as it relates to this? I know you mentioned the phrase before recording, pay it forward. Share a little bit about that.
I can't say that I would be where I am today if I had not been mentored and had a lot of great development opportunities from women who were more senior than I was in my legal departments over the years. And most notably, there was a group called 5 and 165 that was an offshoot, I believe, of Inside Counsel magazine. And this initiative was trying to increase the number of women who are general counsels at Fortune 500 companies in 5 years to 165, with the math being 1/3, roughly. And my general counsel at the time came to me and said, there's this development program, and somebody asked me to select one person to go to it, and I'd like you to go. And I was so flattered. And then I went, and I looked around the room, and I heard everybody talking, and I thought, I don't deserve to be here. These women are amazing and fabulous. And then I kept the whole thought that somebody else selected you versus you self-selecting to be in the program just was top of mind. Okay, well, she thought I deserved to be here, so I'm going to stay and see it through. And that created a great network of support all across the country, and real friendships across the country for me. And that's really what got me started to say, I think I want to be general counsel one day. Because I would tell my husband, like, we want to have a family, and, you know, you want to do everything. And he has a career that is demanding as well. And so I used to just kind of say, hey, I'm good where I am. You know, I don't want to move up. I don't want her job. Do you see the crazy hours she works and that he's putting in and the stress, and I don't want it. And for the first time, that was when I thought, maybe I do. And maybe there's a way that I can, for what I define as having it all, make it happen.
It's amazing that program and how that gave you the confidence, or to show you that this was possible and to have the network support. So tell me about how that's translating now that you are in leadership of a corporate legal department as it relates to outside counsel.
Sure. So that's kind of where this whole pay it forward idea even came to me. In some conversations with women I had met there, they really raised my awareness to an obligation that we have instead of waiting for law firms to present diverse folks to work on our matters to us, that we need to be the ones mandating it or requiring it to the extent that we can, or at least letting them know it's a priority for us. And it's a little bit different in the world that I'm in, because I'm a business to business. I'm not business to consumer. And I think if you're a business to consumer, there's, and especially if you're publicly traded, there's a whole lot more diversity initiatives around there and a whole lot more emphasis to it. But I think if we all, as in-house counsel, can agree that this is kind of the right thing and a priority, we need to make it. There are great opportunities that you can really pay it forward, more than just saying we expect diversity in our billing guidelines. It's as simple as when I have an opportunity to take a client to an event that we are hosting, or even something socially, that I call, and if my go-to person that would call for that firm is a man, then I say, okay, who's kind of an up-and-coming associate female that you have, or a diverse associate that I can take with me, that I can start to build a relationship with, that you think has expertise in an area that will need it, or will just be a great personality fit for the rest of my team.
That's excellent. And how are firms receiving this? I've been hearing lots of feedback around this, but I'm curious from your standpoint.
From my standpoint, they're receptive. I mean, there's a little bit of hesitation, right? Because we still struggle, like so many firms have always, with who's the originating client, whoever is the perceived. There's always going to be a perceived owner of that client, and sometimes where I've been met with some hesitation or resistance has been, well, I'm kind of I'm your contact. You know, you should start with me when you're offering up opportunities to kind of come and get to know you as our client better. I think if it's more of, hey, when you're staffing this matter, I expect to see some diversity there, I think they're open to it. And what I love now is that I'm having to say that even less. I think it seems to be, at least with a lot of the law firms we partner with, happening naturally.
That's great. It's good to hear that there's just understanding and that they're happening. Let's shift gears a little bit to some more questions just about you personally. Okay, so what have you been passionate about lately for you personally?
So as I alluded to, we have a young family. So I have a daughter who just turned 6 and a son who's getting ready to turn 9. And so my passions are dictated by what they are passionate about at the moment. So for my daughter, who's in kindergarten, we are working on sight words and trying to read. And my son loves sports. And so right now we are in swim season and basketball season. So, you know, having time with my family really energizes me, and that's kind of my passion. I mean, if it was just my husband and I think we would travel a lot more frequently. That's something we enjoy doing. We do it as a family, but then getting away just he and I is something that I will continue to be passionate about as the kids get older.
Yeah. And if you two were to travel, where would you go?
A cruise to the Greek Isles is my next, in the Mediterranean. That's
yes.
The next one that I would really like to plan.
Yeah. Go to Santorini and Mykonos.
There you go. I love it.
Yeah, they're beautiful. Tell me a little bit, you alluded to this when we were talking beforehand, but you have a passion for goal setting. And as we're getting towards the end of the calendar year, how do you approach goal setting for yourself and maybe even for your corporate legal department?
Sure. So I'll start with the legal department. So what I always like to challenge my folks to do is not so much think about goals, but think about where should we be as a department a year from now? What should we be spending our time on, or how can we look back and say we were successful? What are the 2 or 3 things? I never want more than 3. 2 or 3 things that a year from now, if we can say we've done these things, we were successful. So, you know, for us, it's largely around process improvements, or in the Japanese world, Kaizen. Mm-hmm. That might be introducing an improved technology for contract management system, or more updated, easier to use contracting templates, or completing a large acquisition that's going to make a big change for the business. But what could we do versus getting, you know, it's always kind of the sand and rocks. So what are those big rocks that we can do before we get bogged down in the day-to-day of the sand and the day-to-day work that's always going to be there? that's what I challenge my team to. For me personally, I love goal setting. So I go through these phases where sometimes it's like every day I'm going to have 2 goals, one personal, one professional, that I'm going to try and achieve. But at the end of the year, I just think it's kind of a natural reflection point that a lot of people say, and I do myself. What are 3 things that I want to do personally over the next year, and 3 things professionally that I want to do over the next year? And then sometimes, kind of I view those as goals. And then I'll also sometimes throw in a resolution, of something that I really want to do. So a couple of years ago, my resolution was that I was going to do a handwritten note every day.
Oh, wow.
Some days I got behind, so I'd have to do kind of a week's worth on the weekend. But I did. And the funny thing was, at the beginning, it was really easy to do because you would have so many thoughts about people that you wanted to send notes to. And then as the year progressed, it got harder. But what I found was it was so interesting that all of a sudden I would read an article or hear something about someone, and it would just inspire me to send them a note. And I just think that mail and handwritten notes are becoming such a lost art that people really appreciate. So it was so funny because I would send a note and then I would get an email back thanking me for the note that I'd sent. But I've always joked and said I could write a book about how it changed my life when I wrote a note every day for a year. So I've got to come up with something fantastic for next year's resolution.
Yes, I'd be curious to hear what that is. We wanted to chat a little bit I was going to bring up about advice you would give yourself if you were to go back through law school again. What would that look like?
Hands down, the one thing that I would do if I had it to do all over again, or to give myself advice, would be to get my MBA at the same time I was getting my JD. At the time I was in law school, those programs for you to complete both in 4 years were just becoming popular, and there weren't many people in my class that had done it. But now, especially if you think that you want to end up in-house, it's invaluable. Because you will find when you are in-house, there's just this kind of, my husband refers to it as corporate speak. So I circle back and I drill down a whole lot. But you pick up on terminology and you understand priorities, and it is so important for a lawyer to be successful in-house to understand your partner's priorities and their focus and what's going to resonate with them. And I think you're better prepared as an in-house lawyer if you have that background versus doing what I did and buying the book, like the 10-day MBA book.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting you bring that up too, because I know when we had talked a little bit also that there was just a general disconnect for outside counsel as they relate to their corporate legal department clients. And that would an MBA, just as you're saying, it sounds like it would help them connect the dots more.
I think it would. I mean, because I think you would understand better in a business world what it is your clients are looking for, or at least the right questions to ask. Because, as lawyers, we get asked, when I was in private practice, you could ask a question, and I almost felt like now, looking back in hindsight, I would run off to find out the answer or to address the problem and not ask the right questions. Because whatever the outside counsel is calling you about, it's not because it's a legal issue, it's because it's a business issue, right? I mean, there's an interplay there. And so I never asked a lot of those questions. Who's driving this? Who wants to know? When do you need to get back to them? In the big scheme of things, how important is this for the business? Is this a strategic initiative that if you can't do it, it's going to derail your plans for next year? Is there a workaround? Is it too late? Have they already done this and you're just trying to understand what the risk looks like?
Mm-hmm. Let me jump on another subject. For you personally, how do you like to wind down from a busy week or a night?
So I do try to do yoga when I can. I love to read when I can. And then the quickest way for us is, as I was sharing with you before, with little kids, they love music. And so we will kind of play. We have I won't call them family theme songs, but we do have like our go-to song, and we'll play that and just kind of dance around. We call it Shaking the Grumpies Out because, working parents can get just as grumpy as sleep-deprived little people. And so that's what we do. And just spending time together with the family is a great way to unwind.
So good. And you had mentioned your love for reading. You brought up a book that I thought was fascinating because of your relationship with the Japanese in business. Can you describe this book again and why?
Yeah, sure. So the book that I have on my nightstand, and I'll admit that I haven't started reading it yet, is The Rice Paper Ceiling, Breaking Through Japanese Corporate Culture. And the way it got on my radar is I work very closely with a lot of Japanese associates who are here on assignment. And I noticed that one of my colleagues was carrying this book around, and I asked him about it. And he said that it was going to help him understand how the Japanese could work better with Americans. And, I tried to explain to him that I view it as a two-way street. Like, yeah, you're here in the United States, but our ultimate parent is a Japanese company, and so you don't have to just mold yourself to the way we Americans work. I should learn even more than I already know about your culture in ways that I can better work with you and better communicate with you. So when he got done with the book, he shared it with me. So luckily he hasn't asked me how I like the book yet, because I'll confess I've had it for a few weeks and haven't opened it yet.
Yeah. Well, again, it just sounds fascinating on the reciprocal side of how we can relate to Japanese. I'd be curious to hear what you learn. A question I like to ask is if you have any current heroes right now, LeaAnn.
So my hero, and she has been for many, many years, was my grandmother. She passed away about 12 years ago, but she was 90 when she did pass away. And so back in the day when not many women were running for office or being elected, she was actually part of what's referred to as the widow's succession in Kentucky. My grandfather was a state representative in the General Assembly in Kentucky and died suddenly in a car accident. And what was common at that time was that and most of the elected officials were men, and so when they would pass away or something would happen suddenly that they could not fulfill their term, their surviving widow would be the one that would very smoothly and easily go through the process to fill out the remainder of their election term. So she did that for my grandfather, and then I don't know if she liked it so much or what led her to do it, but then she actually ran. She was actually opposed and ran and continued to serve another term after that. And so I've always thought, like, how brave and to go through such a sudden traumatic loss, but then still kind of keep your chin up and go forward and serve. And she did some legislation. I have all of her old scrapbooks and things from her time. And so she inspires me every day to kind of take a risk and put yourself out there.
It's fantastic to have that history and inheritance from your family. It's just neat to hear the profound effect of women on your life and where you are now. Seems to really be a theme here. And kind of a question in closing I wanted to ask you is, do you have any holiday traditions as it relates to either Thanksgiving or Christmas as we're upon those days?
So we have, I don't know if you can call 3 years in a tradition, but actually we do not do anything on Thanksgiving. We host, both of my kids have November birthdays, so we kind of host the family. We'll do it this Sunday, so the Sunday before Thanksgiving, for just a real laid-back open house celebration for the kids. And then on Thanksgiving, we stay in our pajamas and watch Thanksgiving Day Parade. And later in the night, we've gone to Dave & Buster's, which is kind of this gaming place. Yeah. Nobody's there. I felt a little guilty because, there are people there working, but they have to be there regardless. And then we actually have Thanksgivings that we go to with our families on Friday and Saturday. But we just feel like it is just an awesome little secret that we don't let a lot of people know. And then for Christmas, I go down to Kentucky for Christmas Eve, and then we obviously do the big Christmas day when Santa comes.
Yep. Well, unfortunately, the cat is out of the bag now, LeaAnn. So I don't know if anyone else is going to.
Now, Dave & Buster's, there's going to be a run on Dave & Buster's.
You're right.
Lines get in the door.
Yeah. LeaAnn, it's been a pleasure to have you on the show, and I just want to say thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Chris. I enjoyed it.
Thank you, everyone who listened to this episode of the Law Firm Leadership Podcast. As a reminder, you can get a PDF download of the transcript of this audio. You can also read it on my website. You can also share it with others, and you can also leave reviews on iTunes. You can find those things at liongrouprerecruiting.com/podcast. If you'd like to suggest someone to be on the podcast, or if you have questions, email those podcast@findthelions.com. That's FINDTHELIONS.com.
Thank you for listening to the Law Firm Leadership Podcast. This podcast is for education purposes only. This content cannot be used for commercial use without written permission from the LeaAnn Group. If you like this podcast, leave a review on iTunes.